This is Rick Jones of FishBait Marketing, and you're listening to From the Bridge. Today is the last show of season number 1. We're going to be taking a little break. I'll be back with you in June. So today we're going to have a little bit of a different show. We're entitling it Sex, Drugs, Rock and Roll, Politics, and Religion. I know everything you're not supposed to talk about. Oh, well, we're going to do it anyway. We're going to be politically incorrect in this final session of From the Bridge in season number 1. I've got an amazing guest speaker. He's Brad Todd of On Message, a guy who combines a whole lot of everything we've discussed this season. Brad runs his own marketing agency in the political world, and he's also my client at our charity, Coach to Cure MD. As always, we'll have another Tuesday tip and our final segment for this season of On the Road with Rick. Got a big show, so let's dive right in. Can you imagine a show where we're going to talk sex, drugs, rock and roll, politics, and religion, all the politically incorrect things? Really, this is a sneak peek at next year's podcast series because we're going to replace the Tuesday tip next year with the soapbox. So today's show is a series of my own soapbox opinions. Yes, these are my opinions. After all, you should never let the truth get in the way with your opinions. Of course, I'm kidding. Well, maybe kind of kidding. But I'm still going to be opinionated today in this final show of the series. So here's my first soapbox. In 1985, ABC Sports, who had been the broadcast partner of the 1984 games in LA, had a sales meeting right after the games. And they created a video that was really then a spoof of corporate sponsorships. They took footage of the 4x400 relay from the previous Olympic Games in 84. That was the American team anchored by Carl Lewis that won the gold. And in this spoof video, they had everything sponsored. When they lined up in each lane, each team had a sponsor. In lane 1, Italy and Pizza Hut. In lane 2, the German team powered by BMW. In lane 3, the USA team powered by Chrysler and McDonald's. It was hilarious. Everything was sponsored. Then they got into the blocks and said, the starter's gun presented by the National Rifle Association. Then when they took off, each handoff of the baton was sponsored by somebody. I remember this first handoff brought to you by Mr. Goodwrench. Hand over your card to the best. And then finally, this is the Miller Lite handoff. You want to have Miller Lite for those final stretches because it won't fill you up. Then they crossed the Ford finish. It was totally a spoof then. I remember getting a copy of that video and leading up into the 96 games in Atlanta, I showed it to some executives from a company then called Northern Telecom, and none of them laughed. In fact, they insisted that they had been there. And my partner, Lance Hill, at the time said, we can't work with these people. They don't have a sense of humor. This really was a spoof video, but today it's real and it's not pretty. Am I the only one that thinks that the radio broadcast of college sports is totally stupid with the sponsor mentions within the broadcast? I listen to Sirius satellite radio when I travel, so I get to listen to a whole lot of games, and those games are brought to you by the home team's local broadcast group. And I absolutely wince when I hear it's another Anderson Furniture first down, or he crosses the Bobby's Body Shop goal line, or they're in the Red Cross red zone. Does anyone think that makes the listener want to rush out to Bobby's Body Shop? Really? I know what you're trying to do, but it's still stupid. Folks, broadcasts should be all about the fan. What's in it for the fan with the Anderson Furniture first down? Well, that would be nothing. Soapbox number 2. We run a tour for Dollar General and ESPN events going around the country to various college football games. And one of the things that we found is the majority of the college fan fest are simply pitiful. Not bad, pitiful. The first word in fan fest is fan, and there's little to nothing in it for the fan. I blame the properties for the lack of creativity. You got to work with the sponsors. You've got to make them bring value to fans. Plus, you need to change the show each week. Let's face it, you have 7 home games. You have a fan fest. I'm a fan. About 85% of the people that come to the games come every week. So you got the same fans coming back week after week after week. So I come to your fan fest week 1. And then I come back week 2 and nothing has changed. Why would I ever come back for game 3, 4, 5, 6, or 7? You've got to change the show. Please look at your fan fest and think like a fan. Soapbox number 3. We've talked a lot in our previous show about properties supporting charities and causes. Well, a couple years ago, I watched all of these NFL teams highlight soldiers returning from the Middle East and being greeted by their families. So families are at an NFL game, and suddenly their loved one appears, and they get to see them for the first time. I thought that was kind of cool, and then I found out the NFL actually charges the government for that, and then I was appalled by that. I'm appalled when people cannot help charities and causes without taking money for themselves. We recently had our Coach to Cure MD Day, which is the last Saturday in September where my coaches wear patches on the sidelines. For the first time this year, many of our schools would not run our PSAs because they weren't getting paid. Really? We're trying to find a cure for Duchenne's muscular dystrophy, and you want to get paid. Are we really that greedy that we have to charge charities in the military? Well, obviously we are. Soapbox number 4, game times. You know, we ran our tour with Dollar General the last couple of years in the Big 12, and we found out that so many of the games were those noon Eastern time games because of television, which meant in Central time zones, those games began at 11 o'clock. That's not good for fans. Who wants to come start tailgating at 5 a.m. in the morning? It's not good for fans. So how about making a rule that only 2 games per year per school are started at noon for each home school? And now, my final soapbox of the day, name, image, and likeness. Regarding the new legislation from California and the pending legislation in multiple states, including Florida, Illinois, New York, and South Carolina, among others, it reminds me of the song Margaritaville by Jimmy Buffett. The song moves from "It's nobody's fault" to "Well, it could be my fault," to the conclusion of "It's my own damn fault." And at the end of the day, it's our own fault for those of us who work in collegiate athletics. We have failed miserably to make a case for the value of a free college education. Former Michigan head basketball coach John Beilein, who's now the head coach of the Cleveland Cavaliers in the NBA, once told me that he had computed the value of playing basketball at Michigan for 4 years exceeded $2 million when you count tuition, room, board, books, tutors, training table, nutritionists, trainers, physicians, flights, first-class hotels, international trips, tournament trips, and the rest of the extras they provide for their players. We have also failed to make a case that, yes, Football does pay all the bills, but those bills include scholarships for all the athletes in the other non-revenue producing sports, creating opportunities for thousands of students. We've also failed by not educating certain student athletes with meaningful skills and degrees in programs that ensure jobs beyond professional sports. Yes, I am saying that we have exploited many, many young people, all in the name of win at any cost. But as Tanya Tucker sang so eloquently, it's a little too late to do the right thing now. The cat is now out of the bag and the genie is out of the bottle. So where do we go from here? Firstly, a university's brand is at stake, and that brand is extremely valuable. A brand is nothing more but nothing less than the promise of this product or service in the minds of the consumer. In this case, in the minds of the student athletes, the parents, the alumni, the faculty, and fans of that institution. Schools have already outsourced their brand to third-party multimedia rights holders, which often erodes the value of that school's brand. Now we may have further erosion with student athletes giving their endorsement to third parties who may or may not be connected to their institution. I know the California law will prohibit athletes from endorsing companies who compete directly with official school sponsors, but I also know we're only one judge away from overturning that policy. Secondly, student athletes are still young people, and young people often make mistakes. Note to self, so do a lot of old people, including yours truly. Part of the education system is allowing students to take chances and learn from those experiences. But mistakes in branding will be both public and long-lasting. So what should we do going forward? I am suggesting that schools now must partner with their MMR partners to help student athletes maximize their income potential while still protecting the value of their institutional brands and their institutional corporate sponsors, who are also a big part of the funding machine of college athletics. And don't discount school-controlled partnerships with the various media companies supporting college athletics. Folks like ESPN, Turner, CBS, NBC, Fox, Barstool Sports, Bleacher Report, among others. And also other organizations that can bring value to all of the integrated parties involved. So in essence, schools and all the rest of us who work in college athletics now need to lead. In other words, have lunch or be lunch. Now here's the final Tuesday tip of the season. Let's stay political. One word: vote or shut up. If you don't exercise your personal right to vote, then you have no business complaining about anything relating to local, state, or the national government. And if your person loses, then stop complaining that the rules are not fair. Your candidate knew the rules when they ran. So please, if you want to change things, get out there and vote. Our special guest angler today is Brad Todd of On Message. Brad basically runs political campaigns for conservative candidates, and he's going to tell you a little bit about that. But he's also the founder of the Coach to Cure MD charity. He'll tell us a little bit about that. He's also the co-author, along with Selena Zito, of The Great Revolt inside the Populist coalition, Reshaping American Politics. We're going to have a lot of fun with Brad today, so let's welcome Brad to the bridge. Brad, welcome to From the Bridge.
Good morning. Thanks for having me.
Well, listen, pal, let's start with this. You're a big sports guy and you're a big college football guy. Where did that start?
Well, if you grew up in big orange country like I did, you can't help but be a big college football fan. It's something you're born with, And I grew up maybe 45 miles west of Knoxville, Tennessee, a little community called Clacks Gap, kind of halfway between Harriman and Oak Ridge, all places nobody's heard of. My dad had dropped out of college, partly because he'd spent too much time on the road following the Tennessee Vols and not enough time in class. And he'd gone back to school years later at night at UT as well. One of the rare luxuries we had was season tickets to Tennessee games. And so, I went to my first game, I think, when I was 5 years old, Tennessee and Clemson. It was a 1-point game. Still remember it. And I kind of got hooked. And I ended up not going to college at the University of Tennessee. I went to a small liberal arts school in Memphis, Tennessee, and then went to grad school at the University of Missouri. So still to this day, I follow the Tennessee Vols and the Mizzou Tigers.
Now, where did you go to college in Memphis? Did you go to Rhodes? Rhodes, yes. Yeah, I was the basketball coach at Swanee. And obviously, at that time, it was called Southwestern at Memphis before it became Rhodes. And the cheer was Southwestern, the school by the zoo, where the men are men and the girls are too.
We have one about Swanee, but it's even less PC than that. So I'll probably not suitable for a family podcast.
Well, it's interesting. Today's title of our final podcast of season number 1 is entitled Sex, Drugs, Rock and Roll, Politics, and Religion. It is my politically incorrect final version that I'm trying to piss off as many people as I can, and they can't get to me for about 6 months till the next.
I think that's a shameless appeal for listeners is what I think that is.
I think it probably is too. So you may know this, Brad, a couple things. I actually worked on the original All Things Mizzou campaign. I came to the university and said, "Are you Missouri, Missouri, Missouri? Are you the Clemson Tigers, the Auburn Tigers, the Grambling Tigers, or the Mizzou Tigers?" But ultimately, I said, "You're All Things Mizzou," and that turned out to be a great, great campaign. For them. Let's switch gears a minute and let's talk politics. Tell me a little bit about On Message, how you got into it, what you do. It's a very you're in a very. I talked about college sports. You're in maybe more of a competitive business, and your season comes to an end in a hurry.
Yeah, it is. It's a lot like sports, by the way. It's someone once said it's a combination of big time sports. Because it is very time deadline oriented, and you end up being very invested in a few big projects over a fairly reasonably long period of time, and they greatly determine your success or failure. I make television commercials for U.S. Senate campaigns, governors' campaigns, congressional campaigns, some trade associations, some corporate work, corporate crisis communications, and that's sort of what we do. We're the firemen. You have a really big problem, and there's time-sensitive deadline to it, and you have to communicate to a large number of people and change public opinion in a fairly short period of time. That's what we do. One of my business partners is a pollster as well, and we have a digital component to our agency. So we're a multi-platform agency, have been since 2009, which is where our business is going. But Rick, I didn't start out this way. I started out as a sports writer, and I got my first job got a paycheck writing for a commercial newspaper when I was 14, if you can believe that. I was the last guy cut on my high school basketball team. And the next day I got a call from the publisher of the paper in our little area. And he said, "I hear you have time on your hands and can write." And so that's how it started. I worked my way through college at the Commercial Appeal in Memphis, Tennessee, in the sports department, and eventually decided I wanted to try my hand at political journalism. And then after trying that for a while, I realized that I didn't want to be writing about politics. I want to be making it happen. So that's sort of my trajectory.
Well, it's interesting. You talk about political campaigns in college football. The great teams and the great coaches make adjustments at halftime. And I think political campaigns very much the same way. You got to read the tea leaves. You got to say we're 4 weeks out. What are we doing well, and where are we getting hurt? And then you got to make an adjustment.
No question. And you're making adjustments even as you're acting. You don't really get the break. You have to keep adjusting as you move. And you start out with a campaign plan, and at first contact, it often gets thrown away and reformatted entirely.
Well, you recently wrote a book, The Great Revolt, Inside the Populist Coalition, Reshaping American Politics. Tell me about your co-writer, Selena Zito.
Selena's a journalist based in Pittsburgh. She writes for the New York Post and the Washington Examiner, and she's a contributor to CNN. And she is widely credited. Everybody says she was the only journalist who got Trump's election right in real time and predicted he would win. Selena stays away from the Beltway. She spends most of her time traveling sort of the back roads, literally, of American politics, and she avoids the interstate. She avoids chain hotels. I have to tell you, she's the best listener I've ever been around. And so she and I wrote this book, and I did sort of the macro trends and what's happening in American politics. We think there's a realignment occurring, which those only happen 4 or 5 times in modern political history. So it's a fairly momentous thing. These things tend to last 40 years or so when we realign. And Selena spent months on the road interviewing voters, and we came up with a group of archetypes for what we view as sort of different types of Trump voters, and some survey research to back up our assertions. And so that's what the book is. It lets you meet, a group of a couple dozen Trump voters who fit in, a half dozen or so archetypes, and help figure out how they came to the decision they came to. And then we ask at the end of the book, okay, that was one election. What does this mean going forward? What's it mean beyond politics? What's it mean for corporate America and commercial sales in America? And does this realignment thing that's happening in politics have spillover? So that's the point of the book. That's what we call it, The Great Revolt.
Well, it's interesting. You really focused on 5, which people call swing states, that were really traditionally blue states, and you went to counties that had historically voted Democratic, largely union counties and places where you had a lot of blue-collar workers, a lot of what I call just American folks. And so it was fascinating to see why they made the decisions that they did.
It was. We did the 5 states in the Great Lakes, Pennsylvania, Iowa, Ohio, Wisconsin, and Michigan, the 5 states in the Great Lakes that had switched. The only other state that switched from Obama to Trump was Florida, which, of course, is almost a country to itself. And so those 5 Great Lakes states, and we went to 10 counties, all of which had switched as well from Obama to Trump, and we varied it up. We started out our process by dividing every county in America into strata, based on their size and based on their educational density, and we tried to have a wide variety of sizes in the counties we chose. Little Lake County in northern Michigan was less than 10,000 people. And then Macomb County in the suburban Detroit, which has about 1 million people. So we really varied it up in the kinds of places we went, but still showed you places where sort of the realignment was happening sort of in front of your eyes.
Well, we're talking right now about how we have such a divided country, that there's so much friction. I did go back and read something last week about John Adams and the Federalists and Thomas Jefferson and the Republicans. So this is not exactly new in American politics.
No. Democracy is a series of rhetorical combat, but politics tends to lag what's happening in the culture at large. Politics reflects our culture, and I think you can see the same phenomenon, what's been going on with the NBA and their problem with China in the last 2 weeks in the news, and the NBA has been afraid to take a stand on Hong Kong protests, and largely it's because the NBA views itself corporately as a citizen of the world. They don't view themselves as a citizen of the United States of America. They view themselves as a citizen of the world. They think their future product market is the entire world, and so therefore they bring a global sensibility to that. And that sort of change in attitude in the corporate C-suites in America is reflected in some of the same things you saw in elections when you saw sort of the two corporate type candidates, Jeb Bush and Hillary Clinton, get beat in the last election.
Well, it's interesting. Since I'm being totally politically incorrect on this one, I'll tell you a story. I'm a big Braves fan, and obviously we come to the deciding Game 5 in the series with the Cardinals. We're at home. We've got everything lined up in our way, and the Braves decide to be politically correct because a pitcher for the St. Louis Cardinals of Cherokee Indian descent makes a comment that the tomahawk chop is politically incorrect and immoral. And so the Braves in that game don't have the chop. They don't play the music. They don't give out the styrofoam or the foam rubber tomahawks, and they get their ass killed. So the baseball gods are politically incorrect, and I think sometimes we just overdo things today. We try to view the world in a 2019 prism, which I think is just very, very difficult to do. To go back and rewrite history and what was going on in some cases 200 years ago it's very difficult right now. I just think we're a little bit out of control.
Well, it is, and part of that's because news moves, at the speed of YouTube, and people who get behind the curve tend to overcorrect because they're seeking to sort of get rid of their problem before it goes viral, and oftentimes that creates a new problem that's viral, and it's we're just in a very interesting period of time where the elites in all manner of our society, be it commercial or political, have not yet quite caught up with sort of the pace and the ability of the average consumer to seek out their own information and react to it quickly.
Well, we build our agency's success on what we call red states, tribes, and lifestyles, meaning that we're really not focused on what people in New York or the West Coast think, because we're engaged in things like country music and college football and NASCAR and hunting and fishing and all those kinds of things. But politically, someone asked me the other day, they said, Rick, where do you fall on the spectrum? And I laughed and said, my party no longer exists. I'm an Eisenhower Republican. And if you remember, Dwight Eisenhower in 1952 was asked by both parties, the Democrats and the Republicans, to be their nominee for president. That's unbelievable that how close those two parties were philosophically at that time. There might have been a little bit of a nuance, but they were coming out of the Second World War, people were in alignment. I guess it was John Adams that said the two-party system would be the bane of our existence. Do you think in American politics there is a place for a third party?
I don't for a couple of reasons. Number one, a two-party system sort of gravitates toward equilibrium. Whenever one party gets a dominant run, they tend to move to the poles of their ideological side and therefore leave a void in the middle. And so the other party, even if it doesn't have its act together, can grab a lot of real estate up in the middle and grow back toward equilibrium, really not even because of their own competence, but because the space is left open, the real estate's left open. So wildly successful parties do not continue to market to their most marginal customers. They begin to market to their most fanatical customers, which is a little bit different than the way corporate America has always worked. Although I would argue that we're now entering a phase where the corporations think they're being rewarded by fringe marketing as well. And so that's really the two-party system has a lot of equilibrium. Second of all, is ballot access laws in America are very tough. In 2016 there was a significant effort to try to get a third-party presidential candidate on the ballot, but if you wait until May, when both parties have picked their nominee, you've now missed the ballot in Texas and North Carolina. There's no way to get on at that point in Texas and North Carolina. And so two of the 10 largest states in the country. And so if you want to have a third party, you would have to begin trying 4 years out. and have to begin working on ballot access laws 4 years out and working on ways to petition on, maybe to cooperate with existing marginal parties. And no one is quite ready to do that 4 years out because they always still have hope that they can change what happens in one of the two parties. So that's the practical burden to it. But systemically, our system, just the two-party system, tends to come back into balance every time it gets out of balance.
Well, I'm going to leave politics before I piss everybody off because you can do that. And I want to talk a little bit about your involvement with the Coach to Cure MD program, how that came about, how you became such a champion for Duchenne's muscular dystrophy. That's how we met. We become friends. We become colleagues working to find a cure for Duchenne. So talk about that a little bit.
Well, some people get involved with a charity the hard way by picking it over a lot of other charities. I got involved with Duchenne muscular dystrophy the easy way. My nephew was diagnosed back in 2005. I only have one sister, and she has one son. And so first year, Joel was diagnosed with Duchenne, which, by the way, is a progressive muscle disorder. It's 100% fatal. Life expectancy is just the 20s. It's a brutal, awful disorder. Boys get diagnosed when they're 3 or 4 years old, and every single day is a little bit harder than the day before that. They lose a little muscle ability every single day until eventually their heart, which is also a muscle, goes. And so after the first year Joel was diagnosed, I stroked the biggest check I could afford to the quest to find a cure. And the second year after he was diagnosed, I stroked the biggest check I could afford. And so eventually there I realized I'm never going to be able to write enough checks. And so we have to find ways, Elizabeth, my wife, and I have to find ways in our life to leverage the other things that we have to bring more resources to bear for this cure. And so Philip Fulmer, who was then head coach at the University of Tennessee, is a friend of mine, and he and I came up with this notion for Coach to Cure MD. The college football coaches at that time did not have a sideline charity where they all did the same thing on the same day during the season to try to draw attention to a cause. And so we felt like there was a void there. And it really wasn't easy. We spent over a year and a half trying to develop a proposal with the American Football Coaches Association that would work for them. And eventually, in 2008, we came up with Coach to Cure MD, where coaches every year in September, on the fourth Saturday in September, wear a patch on the sideline. Some people maybe do it the third week in September if they have a bye. So the idea, though, is for the entire profession to be talking about it in their press conferences, wearing our logo on the sidelines. A lot of coaches now have a Duchenne boy on campus at some point in September, bring him in for practice or have him be an honorary captain for a game. And that bringing a notion of awareness to this disorder helps us raise money, and it also helps other people who are maybe diagnosed with the disease realize they're not in this by themselves. It's a lift to the community in a lot of different ways.
Well, I know the football coaches are very, very, very committed to this, and it's been a long process to begin to get scale to this. I kind of feel like this year we might have turned the corner in a big, big way. We were fortunate enough to persuade our client, Warner Ladder, that has traditionally been involved in college basketball in a big way with the Ladder cutting down the nets to get involved with college football. We'd done all the research and showed that largely the construction trade that they sell to, well, those people prefer college football over any other sport. And we knew we wanted to be in football, but we also wanted to give back. And so we created this program, Step Up with Warner, and part of it is step up and help us find a cure for Duchenne's. And that gave us some media and some clout that I think we're going to be able to build on.
No question. And what you guys at FishBait have done have been phenomenal for us, and you've hung in there with us over a long period of time. And there are days when we didn't know if we'd find a way to scale this or not. And I agree with you. We have maybe achieved a little bit of a breakthrough this year. And, most great ideas are not overnight sensations. They're like over-decade sensations. And so we've now been at this for 12 years. And, I think if you see the commitment level of a coach who has a boy with Duchenne in his life, who met one of those kids, it's just a powerful thing, and fans can go on YouTube and look at what's happened at Ohio State or San Jose State or Pittsburgh. There's just tons of Washington, University of Washington, Seattle, tons of places where these kids who have Duchenne and are really every day is a terrible day when worse than yesterday. And then they go out on the football field and they meet other young men who maybe are in a different spot in their life. It's a really special thing. And I had a coach who coaches at the NAIA level tell me one year, he says, I do this, but I don't do this for you or your Duchenne boys. And I was kind of taken aback when he said that. And he says, I do it for my players, because one of these days they're not going to be my players, and they're going to become the next politicians and scientists and business leaders in America. And he goes, I have 4 years to tell them that they got to be about something bigger than themselves. And Coach DeCure, MD, helps me do that.
Well, I like to tell the story that the reason it's a perfect fit in college football is that, the story is that, when your son first starts throwing the ball around in the backyard with you, my son gets diagnosed. And when your son puts on those pads in the third grade to play midget football for the first time, my little boy's in a wheelchair. And, when your son puts on pads to play high school football, my son has deteriorated and even more. And once your kid gets to run through the T in Knoxville, my son is heading towards the twilight of his life. And I think coaches really wanted to do that. It is a muscular disease. Football is a muscular game. But, Brad, we're close, I think. I really believe in this era of genetic research, we are very, very, very close to finding a breakthrough and a cure for this. And I like to tell people the dollar you give to Coach DeCure, MD, or to Parent Project Duchenne's could be the dollar that does it.
I think that it is. We are on the cusp. And we didn't even understand how this disorder worked until 1986. It's the most common lethal genetic disorder diagnosed in a childhood of young man. I mean, it is the largest gene in the body that's defective. We didn't even understand how it worked till 1986. And when we started Coach DeCure, MD, back in 2008, Rick, there had only been one clinical trial of a potential therapy in the United States, just one. There are 50 trials underway right now, and there have been 50 trials underway for the last 2 years in perpetual in the United States. And so we've had 2 therapies approved. They affect a small population of these boys, and they're not a cure, but they are help. And that in itself is a breakthrough. And once those FDA had approved those 2 therapies, we've just seen a resurgence of interest in the biotech sphere for research. And we also, by the way, wouldn't have gotten those 2 therapies approved if the public hadn't demanded it. The first one, people always ask me, say, does this really matter? Does it matter if I give $1? Does it matter if I learn about this disorder? And the answer is yes, it does. The first time a therapy came before the Food and Drug Administration, they rejected it. And the United States Senate went in an uproar over that rejection, and the FDA reconsidered its decision and approved it. And then they approved a second one subsequently. Well, the United States Senate did not get in an uproar overnight. They got in an uproar because enough of their constituents had learned about Duchenne muscular dystrophy and had a big heart for these boys. That happens through things like Coach DeCure, MD. That's what drives that awareness. And so getting involved in a cause like this, you think, well, what I do today matter? Absolutely, it'll matter. The dollar you give matters. The word you spread, just people merely telling other people about it. That in itself also makes a big difference.
Well, we were fortunate to get Whataburger out in Dallas this year to do a promotion for us where if you donated $1, they gave you a $1 coupon. So you got free food.
Whole Whataburger coupon. You got a free Whataburger coupon, and that money is going to go toward. We have a goal. So Parent Project Muscular Dystrophy is our mothership. That's the charity that Coach DeCure, MD is a part of that charity. It's the largest grassroots charity devoted to this cause in the country. And a few years back, Parent Project began certifying clinics that follow the best practices for the treatment of Duchenne. And part of the issue with a disease like this is, if you're a pediatrician and you see one of these cases, it might be one of only 2 cases you see your entire life. So the first one comes along, you may not even know what you're looking at. And even if you're a neurologist in a medium-sized town in America, you may not come across many of these cases. And so the standard of care really varied a lot. And so one of Parent Project's missions has been to standardize care through the certification of Duchenne care clinics. And there are a little over 24 of those clinics around the country right now where these clinics follow the best practices. So if your kid gets diagnosed with Duchenne, first thing you do is you go get in the car and drive to one of these certified care clinics so that you know you're getting the best care in the business. There's not one in the Southwest, not in Texas, anywhere in Texas or any state that touches Texas. So we have as a goal to establish a certified Duchenne care clinic in Dallas, and that's what Whataburger did this year with their promotion, is to sort of help us provide a whole lot of money toward that objective. We're going to announce the total raise this coming Saturday at the SMU football game. SMU's undefeated. Everybody's pretty excited about that in Dallas. We're excited about getting to announce it there. And, of course, it reestablishes that tie between college football and Duchenne muscular dystrophy.
Well, I'm a big believer that the two businesses you're engaged in, politics and charity, are noble. I still believe, I guess I'm a little Pollyannish, but I think people get into politics to help people, and I know what we're doing with Coach DeCure MD is helping families and helping young men and helping the young men that are not yet born. And so I'm proud to be your partner in this. I'm proud of what you've done. I'm proud of Joel for the things he does each and every day. So, Brad, this has been terrific today. I want to thank you a lot for being with us from the bridge.
Thanks for the opportunity, as always.
Here's the season finale of On the Road with Rick. We've talked a lot about politics today, so here's a great place to eat in our nation's capital, Washington, D.C. It's the Old Abbott's Grill. Founded as a boarding house near Chinatown by William E. Abbott in 1856, this restaurant is still around. Many political celebrities spent time at the bar there, including Presidents Andrew Johnson, Ulysses S. Grant, Grover Cleveland, William McKinley, Warren Harding, and Teddy Roosevelt. The restaurant has moved 2 times before settling permanently on 15th Street near the White House. It fell on hard times in the 1960s, and then a tax lien forced an auction where the current owners bought the place. They didn't want to bid on the whole place. They wanted to bid on some china and then found out they could buy the whole thing for about the same price as the china, and they bought it. Today, it's both a local and a tourist establishment. They have wonderful, classic American food. Start with a bowl of clam chowder or oysters on the half shell or an American cheese sampler. Move on to great burgers and sandwiches or entrees like wonderful crab cakes, all washed down with a classic American lager. The Old Abbott's Grill, a truly American institution. So that's both our show for today and a wrap on Season 1. It's been a lot of fun, and I appreciate all of my guest anglers and everyone who has listened. Special shout out to my producer, Lindsay Collins, who is a rock star, and my son and colleague, Ryan Jones, who has worked with me daily on these podcasts. Have a happy holidays, and we'll see you back here from the bridge next June. In the meantime, as the great beach music group The Tans once sang, be young, be foolish, be happy. This is your captain, Rick Jones, signing off.
This has been your captain, Rick Jones, from the bridge. If you like what you hear, please share, subscribe, and leave a 5-star review on your favorite podcast directory.